Hey, everyone. It is Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. I'm back with another comic book countdown. Here are the 12 books I picked up on New Comic Book Day just about a week ago, Wednesday, the September 8th, I believe. And today's Tuesday as I film it, so the cycle begins again tomorrow. Um, I really enjoyed every single one of these comics. Um, Even the one that's going to be ranked number 12 is a comic I enjoyed reading. And as always, these rankings are my super subjective, just in the context of my enjoyment of the comics at the time I read them. In fact, the ones that ended up in the top three, as I read each one, I thought, oh, this one's going to be number one for sure. And perhaps not coincidentally, the one that I did end up putting at number one is the one that I read last. So who knows how it would have come out if I'd read them in a different order. But this is just the diary of my reactions to what I read. So the chips fall where they may. I'm going to do something a little scary. I'm going to try a brand new drink. I really liked the bottle. It's a sparkling tonic by Sunwick. Herbs and superfoods for daily wellness. It's going to make me live forever. Or I may not want more than one sip. I don't know. The flavor is Lemon Rose Uplift. It has a faint sense of like furniture cleaner. It's like, I'm not really, but it's one of those drinks that might take getting used to. Maybe I'll love it after I drink a lot of it, but maybe this is the only time I'll get it. And oddly, even though I perceived that all the comics I read were good and fun to read, I felt very grumpy anyway. I kept thinking about, oh, maybe I really should be reading this in trade, or the art. Just why can't the art be more like I would like? So, I mean, art is very personal, really. Color, too, I think, now that we have. And these are things I harp on all the time, especially the color and the waiting for trade. But so in at number 12 is this Kyle Higgins and Wannabe, the artist Felipe Wannabe. Oh, co-writers Kyle Higgins and Joe Clark. Ordinary Gods. It's a quite decent book about these sort of hidden gods amongst us from another dimension and the war, or sort of they had a war, and the conflict that will rise up again if they become self-aware with the gods of the other universe. So here's some of the gods of the other universe. Worry, I think she's Worry. The naming of the gods is a little funny. At points, like looking right there, the coloring, it's not totally to my taste, but it's kind of cool. But other times, like in this panel here, it really doesn't work for me. There's something about the way the artist uses his or her blacks, his blacks, I believe, and the way the colorist works around them that just, I don't know, gives a smudgy kind of look, and maybe that's an aesthetic choice that's done on purpose, but it just doesn't wow me. But I had no problem making out what was going on or any of the important points of the story. So the storytelling was good and everything. I think the reason it's at the bottom of the list is because the art just wasn't to my taste. And there's a certain sense of familiarity with these kind of stories. It feels like there's a lot of comics I've read in the last few years with these sorts of situations in them. There's even this is a Kyle Higgins book, but there's a Colin Bunn's book out there that has a similar feeling of a group of sinister godlike beings who look like humans and are wandering around amongst us. Although I should say this one is more complicated, or seems like it's going to be more complicated. And then a book I wish had been more complicated. Victor LaValle's Eve. Well, I don't know if it's called Victor LaValle's Eve. But anyway, Victor LaValle's the writer, and he did another book that was literally called LaValle's Frankenstein or something like that, which I haven't read, but I'm now curious about. Anyway, it wraps up in 5 issues. It really needed more time to breathe and develop, and so everything feels kind of rushed and just so, and yeah, so it made it less satisfying. But I really, it's not that I only like traditional art from the old days when I was a kid. I really enjoyed this art, even though it's very different looking from traditional comic book art. But here, for me, the colors and the art worked well. And I still, because I really liked about the first 2 or 3 issues, so I still have a lot of interest in this writer, Victor LaValle, and I'm going to look for more work by him. And I think I read that is he doing something at Marvel coming up soon or something like that. But also, this was the overfamiliar tale about the ecological collapse of Earth, and then it was nice in that it had this family basically that was of scientists that was working to fix things, and it involved clones and robots and stuff like that. But it all just felt rushed in the end. So that was number 11. In at number 10 is The Unbelievable Unteens by the Unteam of Jeff Lemire and Tyler Crook. And Tyler Crook does his uncrook-like art for the pages of the comic book about these characters that's within this comic. And I love that kind of conceit. I wouldn't say Tyler Crook's artwork looks very much like anything Silver or Bronze Age, but they do kind of color it in an interesting way. Again, not really colored the way the Silver and Bronze Age comics looked, but interesting color choices there. And I think all the colors by Tyler Crook also. Yes, art, colors, and letters by Tyler Crook. He does a good job with the lettering. So that comic book within a comic book is very fun to look at and perfectly fun to read. And I love Tyler Crook's normal watercolor painted style. He doesn't get to show off as much here. It's more dark and muddy, I guess, but not in a way that's a problem for me. But I mean, I just remember how much I loved, what was it called? The Cosmogog that he did, the other Black Hammer series that he did with Jeff Lemire recently. That was a visual treat. But that one, you had to have read Black Hammer, the main Black Hammer series, I think, to understand. This one really seems to stand alone. You don't need to have read Black Hammer. The only thing it has in common with Black Hammer, as far as I can tell, is kind of the tone, the wistful feeling about superheroes, and that balance between nostalgia and a more realistic view of superheroes. So it was fun. There was nothing super surprising, but it was a good, solid issue that just keeps rolling out the story. I hope the story will be more than 4 issues. Everything from Dark Horse these days has been 4 issues, but I think a lot, the way most writers write these days, you need a minimum of 5 issues, if not 12 issues, to tell your story in a satisfying way. But anyway, that one was really good. So, maybe that was number 10. Maybe the top 10 of these could all, be high-level comics for me. Not All Robots continues the story. It now, after issue 1, feels more familiar, and it moves along fine with no surprises. It's Mike Deodato and Mark Russell writing the script, and I talked quite a bit about how I thought Mike Deodato might not be the right choice for a humorous story. This issue felt less humorous, and I don't know if it was affected by the art or some feedback between the writer and the artist, but I'm not saying less humorous in a bad way. I enjoyed it, and I really liked where it was going by the end of the issue, and I'm really interested. And, just thumbing through it, the art and colors are fantastic, but although very Photoshop, traced, working from photographs kind of feel in the Mike Deodato art, but still very interesting always to look at. And Lee Loughridge is an excellent colorist, but it did pass through my mind. One of my main thoughts was, this is colored mostly the way Lee Loughridge would color any art by by Diodato. I guess it was even darker and grittier in that Western apocalypse they did Redemption together. But could Lee Loughridge have punched the colors in a different way to make this feel more like a satirical humor book and less like a straightforward science fiction book? Does the creative team discuss this kind of thing? Or is it just like, oh yeah, Lee Loughridge has his colors go great with Mike Diodato's artwork. And I have to say, every time I've seen Lee Loughridge's colors, I've really liked them. So I'm not necessarily criticizing them, but that was just a big thought of mine. Like, could the colors have made the book feel more like a funny book? It's a weird taste. It's probably the rose. I mean, I haven't had rose in many drinks. Yeah, and that gives it almost like you're drinking like perfume or something. And it says sparkling tonic, but I don't notice the bubbles. Maybe this is just I should start a bottle collection. One bottle of each kind of interesting bottle, because that feels like something to collect to me. Of course, it's not. It's just even though this is a natural food company, it's just a sort of plasticky decal wrapped around the bottle. Not like old school bottles. I used to have friends back in Connecticut where I grew up, but also for a while as an adult, I worked there on a surveyor's crew. And a lot of the people I met were people who, when they were out in the woods, they would search for old colonial bottles or other old bottles. People were very into collecting old bottles. Okay, that's a big aside. At number 8 is The Me You Love in the Dark, which is a very good story about one character and a ghost in her house. And it's fantastic artwork. I'm kind of interested to see if I'm getting a peek in at Scotty Young's thoughts about art, maybe fine art versus, I don't know if it's versus anything. But anyway, since Scotty Young himself, the writer, is an artist, although it is drawn by Jorge Corona, who, and equally important, the colorist Jean-Francois Beaulieu. I don't know how to say his name, but he is another favorite colorist with a very distinct way of coloring. He's colored a lot of Scotty Young's work, I believe, and he colored the other comic book by this team, Middle West, which looked incredible. So I think this is more for the art. It's a perfectly pleasant story, but it's just really fun looking at this art, enjoying it, the colors and the layouts and the storytelling. We'll see. It's going to take a few more issues to really tell if that story, if this Me You Love in the Dark, which I ranked at number 8, I don't know if I said that, if it will develop into a more of a story or if it's just a brief little mood piece. Okay, another one that I am grooving on is The Last Book You'll Ever Read. Colin Bunn's been putting out a lot of horror books lately, and most of them are very good. There's one or two that didn't grab me, but I feel like he's on a hot streak for me. He's always put out a lot of stuff, but sometimes it didn't land with me, and right now a lot has been landing with me. And the artist is Layla Lees, and the colorist is Gadia Marchisio. And at times I like their art, and at other times it doesn't work for me. Like these pages here, it looks kind of chaotic. You can follow it if you're really paying attention, but a quick look at it, the eye kind of bounces off of it a little bit. I think I would have ranked this even higher than number 7. Yeah, number 7. Although in such a collection of comics that I enjoyed, it's hard to say. Some of these pages work very well. Like I like that page there quite a bit. There's some really nice drawing here at times. And it's kind of a unique story about this woman who has written this book that's going to convince everyone to become uncivilized and to become wild. And they don't stint on the sex, for those of you who like your booty calls in your comics. So that page is a bit, I won't show it here, but yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. And if the art were advanced a little bit further, it would really, really click. At number 6, one I bought because it's kind of a commemorative issue. I'm a sucker for a special event. I have not been buying Marvel's Conan for quite a while now. But this is both issue 300 and conveniently issue 25. So they made it a $5 issue, and they packed it full of a lot of different stories. Let's see, I think there's a table of contents here. There's the main story, which is by the main creative team of Jim Zub and Corey Smith, plus inker and colorist. I just can't read everyone. And then we had a Larry Hama written story, a Dan Slott written story, and a James Owsley / Christopher Priest written story. He uses both names. Priest, FKA, Jim Owsley, formerly known as. At first when I saw FKA, I thought it was something with the F word in it. Fucking killer asshole or something, Jim Owsley. And most of the art, or I'd say all of the art, is very good. So the main story had Conan and Belette at some point when they were together, going into some kind of ancient tomb or temple. And this Corey guy, I really liked his art. I didn't think the coloring always served him. For instance, like one of the really cool things about the Hyborian Age is the sense of all the ancient layers of civilization and such. And I appreciate it when the artists put a lot of work into the backgrounds and the design of things. And it seemed like Corey was doing that, but the colorist kind of colored away the background so they were just barely there, in a sense, so that you mostly focused on the figures. And I just thought, let us enjoy the architecture more. Well, now that I've dissed him, I put it, and not all the coloring's bad. Like this double page spread, it's fine. But he kind of had something against. He kind of, I think there's even like a subtle blurring to the backgrounds, which maybe makes sense to some people, but to me it doesn't, and especially for Conan. So in this, Belette and Conan fight two different versions of Conan that come out of these testicles or whatever, out of these pods. And one is King Conan and one is young Conan. And I'm not sure of the point of it all. Like, why was there this temple with versions of himself, or were they quickly created by the temple? But they defeat these versions of himself and say, I would never yield and that kind of thing. So they're not quite himself. So it made kind of a cool little anniversary story about the different ages of Conan. So that wasn't bad. It felt kind of pointless. And then Larry Hama teamed up with this artist, Paul Davidson, and I really liked Paul Davidson's art. And I guess, Larry Hama can be forgiven, I suppose, because it was just a little backup story. But it's just a story of young Conan in the time of the Frost Giant's daughter, killing a bunch of these redheaded guys. Guys, what are they? Vanir or I'm trying to remember. They might be Vanir. I don't know. Anyway, they're kind of Viking types, and they all think they can beat him, and he brutally kills them all wonderfully drawn by this artist. But other than that, and then at the end trying to make a point about civilization, but the Vanir are barbarians like Conan, right? They're not part of the civilized lands. They're not part of it. But at the end he says, so far this civilization thing seems like a conspiracy of the weak to lord it over the strong. Are you laughing yet, Crom? Why do I bother asking? But given my understanding of Conan lore, he was not in civilization, so that's just kind of goofy. And then there's this great silent piece written, however much that means, by Dan Slott, arts by Marcos Martin, and his regular colorist, who I think is his wife, Munsta Vincente. And it's this great story of a really drunk Conan who's out of cash for booze. So he accepts a thieving job and, has adventures in this tower, as they often do. Fights a giant beast, finds a beautiful girl, and then, I'm going to spoil it here, wakes up in the morning with a beautiful girl, can't remember who she is or why he's there, and he can't even remember why he has this precious egg here that he had helped steal, because he was too drunk to remember any of it. And again, that would no doubt be in his early thieving days when he was a teenager or a early 20-something. And then a very interesting story written by Christopher Priest with another excellent artist who really evoked, I don't know, a bit of a John Buscema-ish feeling, but a little Frazetta, a little Buscema. So it was very nice art. Who is it? Roberto de la Torre. They should get him on some Conan right away. And this one is about a very old Conan who can barely lift his sword. And it's kind of a meditation on old age and being a king, in a sense. And I guess it all turns out to be a dream. So it's kind of Owlsley making his own commentary on Conan, because Conan himself, even in old age, would be indomitable and our hero, right? So he's sort of stepping out of the bounds of the normal Conan canon, you might say. But I thought it was a good story. Then in at number 5, I've got Kanto. This is the third series of Kanto, and it's the third issue. And this was, I enjoyed reading it, but it was getting to the point where I felt like, I need to reread all of the Kanto stories to remind myself of who everyone is. I just couldn't. So despite that, I'm ranking it pretty high up at number 5. And I feel like the art keeps getting better and better, the color and the art. The color's a little on the dark side for me, but it works. I really enjoyed it. I am getting this sinking feeling that it's more of a trade read. At least for me, because I'm not retaining enough month by month. So it seems like some stories stick in my head a little more than others. I hope that doesn't upset certain Kanto fans out there. In at number 4, I put The Defenders. Mother of Galactus. This was wacky fun. We've got, apparently, where we live, or the Marvel Universe is the 7th iteration of the universe. And so they've gone back in time to the 6th iteration of universe. The universe where Galactus was a baby named Galen, and his universe was being destroyed by some destroyer of universes, the Cosmic Judgment. So the highlight, the writing is fine by Al Ewing, although not up to his Immortal Hulk level, I feel. But the art by Javier Rodriguez is, it's a huge draw for me. It's really fun. It has a retro feeling, but it also feels like no other. I kind of got a Jim Steranko vibe from the previous issue. I feel less of a Steranko vibe here, and it feels a little more its own thing, although I'm sure there's tons of influences of all kinds of Silver and Bronze Age artists here. The coloring, which is also by Rodriguez, is kind of cool looking, but at times I found it distracting. I wondered, maybe I should read this digitally and it will come off differently. It's a little hard on the printed page sometimes to take in too much color, if that makes sense. There is the free digital copy available, or I could wait 3 months and read it because I have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited. A lot of Marvel books in this pile for me, 3 of them, all of which I enjoyed a lot. So maybe I should be doing Marvel Unlimited less and going straight into. But yeah, the coloring was a bit of a problem. But I actually love this issue. If the script were even better, like it's just a wild jaunt, it might have matched my top 3, the 3 number ones as I was calling them. At number 3, so my first number 1 in a sense is a Ka-Zar or Ka-Zar. I like to say Ka-Zar actually as a kid. Ka-Zar, Ka-Zar. Now that they're equally stuck in my head. Lord of the Savage Land. You would think it would be a Ka-Zar zombie story, but inside he is already all risen from the dead in his hole. He's got a little PTSD from being dead. The color and art, the script was very good by writer Zach Thompson, who I think this might be my first Zach Thompson story. The art was really nice. The colors by Matthias Lopez, who I believe is also the colorist on that Supergirl book, was really nice. I mean, I loved this art in here, but at the same time I thought, is this art right for a jungle action kind of story? Is it too fine? Is it too ethereal? Should it be a little more down to earth? See, that's just why I was grumpy and nitpicking. I was loving it and complaining about it at the same time. My one complaint here, or not complaint, but caveat or whatever, is both, for whatever reason, which I don't understand the reasons because they're not given here, both Shanna the she-devil, Ka-Zar's wife, and Ka-Zar himself have strange and not very consistent superpowers. And I think sort of the fun of Ka-Zar was that he was, like Tarzan or like Batman, just the extreme of human perfection and ability to survive in a hostile environment. But now he's got all these superpowers. And I hope I will continue to get this because I'm enjoying it a lot. I don't know how long this series is expected to go. But I hope that they explain it more, and I hope eventually they just have the powers go away and have him return to be, just this awesome guy who lives in the jungle, right, with his awesome wife, who also is a super jungle athlete. They have a son named Matthew, and I found him an interesting character. I guess I've been so long out of the Ka-Zar loop. I mostly read just old Ka-Zar comics that I did not know about the son. I'm going to have to wrap this up quickly. Or you know what? I'll finish this later. So there'll be a slight blip. You'll hardly notice the difference, and I'll be back. So in at number 2 is the 6 Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton, issue number 4. And I read this last night before going to bed, and I was sure this was going to be my number 1 in the stack. Loved reading it. It continued to be really funny. They added in, I guess, does each issue add in another character? They added in another character who's an interesting one. He was one of Trigger Keaton's sidekicks, Richard Brannigan, who actually goes on to have a career, although maybe not as successful as like. But I still, most of all, loved this female character who is great at kicking butt, but maybe not so good at other things, Allison St. Marie. And there were some cut pages like these where I really liked the coloring. There's still some other pages where, this one's a flashback, so I guess that's okay. But where the color kind of let me down, particularly sometimes where, and the coloring is done by Richard Starks, not Richard Starks. What am I saying? It's written by Kyle Starks. The coloring is done by the artist Chris Schweitzer. Most of it I liked much better than previous issues. But at times, like here, it seemed hard to see the faces and stuff. I'm just in a grumpy mood where I want to complain. This was marvelous the way the other characters were off doing other stuff, and this woman who's the super fighter gal, stays behind to take on a large group of stuntmen who hate these ex-actors and hate their old boss and transfer their hatred from their old boss or their old acting partner to them. So for a good section of the story, we get her fight scenes around the edges. And that I haven't seen that before, and that was marvelous. And it ends here where the fight ends. So this was a very good, very funny issue. It feels like this just gets funnier as it goes along, as the characters build up. Some of the characters are more built up than others. And there's this, in some of these other comics I did not read the back matter, but there's this funny interview with Brannigan, this actor character, at the end. This, as I was reading this, I was thinking, wow, this would make a really good movie or TV show, like a short streaming show on Prime or something. And normally I don't want my comics to become TV shows, but I couldn't help but see this one as a movie, actually. Something Quentin Tarantino-ish, perhaps. Although with less cynicism, perhaps. There's cynicism, but with a lighter touch than Quentin Tarantino might have. So finally, the last comic I read, another excellent comic, and I couldn't help putting Dead Box as my number one comic. It has great art, great coloring, and to my mind, one of Mark Russell's best scripts in a long time. It kind of, I don't know if the whole series will match up to the Flintstone series he did, but I kind of felt in that vibe of the Flintstones a bit. Not that the humor it's a different type of humor than in the Flintstones, and it's tinged with even a darker sadness. But it's Dead Box instead of Red Box, the machine that, here in the U.S. at least, at convenience stores and grocery stores is available to rent by the day, DVDs, for those people who still don't do a lot of streaming. And it's often obscure stuff or straight to DVD kind of movies, I believe. And so in this, a good part of the comic book is this sort of weird sci-fi movie that our heroine rents. And it's really a fun jape. It reminds me somehow of stories within stories in Kurt Vonnegut books, like where he'll tell you the plot of some book written by Kilgore Trout. This is like a Kilgore Trout book turned into a movie. And he gives us that about a lone space traveler who's sent to visit these aliens that humans have made friends with through communication, through space, and now they're sending someone through space to visit, but it takes 50 years to get there. And hilarity or sadness and irony ensue. But and it takes place in this really small town that's so out of the way they don't even have the internet, I guess. And every character feels like they're just developed wonderfully in a few lines. This is some of Mark Russell's best writing. He also throws in kind of his, I don't know if you want to call it political or philosophy of civilization kind of discussion. And one at the beginning is this extremely well-written little bit about the concept of owning property, which is really interesting. I am mostly a capitalist, but for a moment there I was convinced that we should not own property, that the idea of private land was somehow weird, which I'm sure the American Indians, the Native Americans of old, would find a compelling argument. So anyway, each character in this small town, as we meet them at the convenience store, the main character is this woman who works at the convenience store, and her dad is sick, the owner of the convenience store, and she encounters various characters, and they're just, I don't know. I guess there's not much more to say, except that each one is delineated really well. in it. It just reads really well. It has a great rhythm to it. So yeah, I think even if I'd read in different order, this would be my favorite comic of the week. It's interesting. I saw someone else's review and they pointed out, well, this wasn't really horror. And yeah, so far it's not really horror. But on the last page, there's a hint of the horror to come. I have a feeling Vault is known for horror, and this is a Mark Russell book that has a bit more of a horror aspect to it, but is like the best Mark Russell comics about a lot more than just the horror. The art team, I don't think I've heard of Benjamin Tiesma and Vladimir Popov. Popov is the colorist, but they do an excellent job. I like even that the credits page is kind of like part of a red box, the screen on the red box. Anyway, excellent comic for me. I loved it. So a great week of reading comics despite my grumpiness. And I'm at this current stage in life, I am much preferring reading comics serially. So I kind of get upset, or grumpy, I should say, when I realize, I would be better off reading this in trade, because I would rather not be better off reading it in trade. I would like all my comics to be better in serialized and limit the number of trades I get to mostly deluxe hardcovers and things like that of older books. But so it goes. You can't have everything the way you want it. Try as I might. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
한가름 우리 둘 사이를 좁혀가